Welcome to the Crafty View. I'm Diane Williams, the host for the show. And my guest today is Marcy Petrini. She is a fiber artist, she's a weaver, a writer, and a teacher. Welcome to the show, Marcy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have known you and your work for many years. And I believe, I don't know, I think I have a piece from like many years ago. I don't have it in this home, but I had it when I was a married woman. I had it. I don't think my ex knows what he really has.
Yes, I can imagine that some of those things get lost. Yes.
Yes. So here we are. I'm getting ready to talk to you about the work that you do. And I can see that we're in your studio. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. And the studio was built in 2014 after a tornado hit the side of the, well, didn't hit the house, but it hit the yard. And there was a wonderful grove of trees that was decimated. And so my husband had the idea that we should build a studio because I did have things, looms and spinning wheels and yarn and pieces all over the house. This way kind of consolidated. I said that he had an ulterior motive. He wanted all that stuff out of the house. But it's here now, and both looms are here, and the spinning wheels, and so it's great to be in one place.
So you said both looms. So you have two looms in your
I have
studio?
two, actually I have three, but the two looms that I do most of the work are here. So this one is actually, it's a four shaft, what we call a four shaft loom, which my husband built back in the 70s, and it's still going strong. And I weave patterns, and it's got a width of up to 36 inches. In the back, you see there's a shawl there hanging. So back here, there's another loom. This is a bigger loom. And this is more complicated loom. And actually, it has 40 shafts. So we're going from 4 to 40. So that makes much more complicated patterns, but also means that it's impossible to lift the shafts in combinations, because if you can imagine with 4 you can lift 2 and have 2 behind, 3 up, 1 down. With 40 you have all the different combinations. So it's actually computer driven. And people think that I'm sitting there and the computer does the weaving. Well, I have to program the pattern on the loom that the loom is going to weave. So I have to go in there and put in my pattern, adjust it for the floats, and do all of those things. So usually it takes me longer to design a piece on the loom than it does to weave it. Once I'm weaving it, the weaving is the same. I step on a treadle, I throw the shuttle, beat, do the next shot. But all the designing, because it's so complicated, it takes much longer. So those two looms is what I keep going. I also have what we call a little rigid header loom that does 2 shafts, and it does simple things. And sometimes that's a fun thing to do, to sit by the fire and do some weaving. I still can make little scarves and do color different designs to analyze color. So, but primarily those are the 2 looms that I weave on.
So physically, with the manual loom, is it just your hands that are involved, or is it your hands and your feet?
Hands and feet. And now there are table looms where your hands do everything, but that basically means that it's going to take twice as long to do things. But in both looms, the feet step on a treadle. In the case of this loom, of the 4 shafts, there's different treadles that I have to tie to have different combinations. So I step on it and then I throw the shuttle. I step on the next one. I throw the shuttle, beat toward me, and then change what was called the treadle, the treadling, and then the next shot, and so forth. In the 40 shaft loom, instead of tying the treadles on the floor, I tie them on the computer. I just put in different symbols that I want together. And so then I still push a treadle, but that treadle sends a signal to a motor that lifts the shafts. So it's still the same process. It's still as time consuming in terms of you have to step on the treadle, throw the shuttle, beat, do the next one. And but because of the complication on the 40 shaft loom, there is more design work that has to be done in order to get there.
How long did it take you to learn how to work the electronic, the mechanic, the
Um,
computerized?
Not very long, because in my previous life, as I like to say, I was a scientist. I was a faculty member of the medical center. And when I started with my PhD work many, many years ago, we didn't have the luxury of spreadsheets and all of those good things. So everything we did, we had to program. So I learned to program computers to do the analysis and the calculations that I needed. So once I got to this, doing this analysis for the shafts, it wasn't difficult because it was similar to what I was doing. If someone didn't have the computer background, it may take a little bit more time. But because basically that's what you're doing. You're programming a computer to do the lifting of the shafts for you, and you have to tell her which shaft you want. And of course, you want to make sure that you don't have a thread that is that long that that it gets caught off the fabric. So you have to adjust all of those float lengths.
How long have you been a weaver?
I started weaving in 1970, no, 71. But before that, I was involved with fiber all of my life. My aunt did embroidery and she taught me to embroider. My mom did a little bit of knitting. I was surrounded. I lived in Rome, Italy. I'm Italian by birth. I learned, my neighbors were all doing handwork. My grandmother, this was after World War II, my grandmother used to do the most exquisite mending. If there were socks that had a hole, she would mend it. You couldn't even tell where the mending started and ended. And the same thing, if it was woven, she rewove it. Fabric was precious. And so I grew up having that feeling that fabric is precious and that you should treat it, especially now people, buy t-shirts and then 6 months later it's in the garbage, which is an environmental problem, incidentally. But then I found out that there were classes being taught in Rochester at the art gallery there, and I was lucky enough to take them. Then my husband built me a loom, and so it's very seldom that I don't have some weaving work in progress. So like right now, that piece just came off the loom, but it needs to have things trimmed and being steamed. My husband takes the pictures, so tomorrow is going to be taking pictures. That's going to go in the blog. The white piece is going to go in the blog. And so I'm always working, getting ready for the next project, because you have several steps. You design, you have to wind your warp on a warping board or putting on somehow on the loom. You put it on the loom and then you start weaving. By the time you get to weaving, you've done half the job on the loom, and then whatever design work you did ahead of time.
It seems to me that you and your husband are partners in crime.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. And all started because I was asked to write a column for our national magazine. It's a Handweavers Guild of America publishes a quarterly magazine called Shuttle, Spindle, and Die Pop. And the editor there, I was on the board of director. I had been president of the organization. When I stepped down, when I was finished with my term, the woman that was the executive director and the editor of the magazine asked me if I would be willing to take over this column that had been being woven by what we call her our weaving godmother. It was an older lady. She's still alive, and we're actually friends on Facebook. And so Betty had been writing that column for a little bit, but Betty had told Sandy, the editor, that she was really going to be moving to a retirement community, and she really didn't know what facility she was going to have. So she really wanted someone else to do it. So Sandy asked me to do it. It was kind of a trial. And so I did. And she liked my writing. So I started writing. But then what was happening was that I would do the whatever samples or pieces. I would have to ship them in Georgia, in Atlanta, the burbs of Atlanta. And then eventually we'll get them back. Well, one time for one of our festivals, Sandy was here and she turned to Terry and said, you know, if you took her pictures, she wouldn't have to send these pieces to us and we wouldn't have to send them back. So why don't you, I'll show you. And that's how I got started. So she really was his mentor for a while. And so we started, you know, doing it and getting better and better. And now when we go to our national weaving conventions, the current editor, because the other editor, of course, retired, has him take pictures of the conference. And so that's, you know, we're both in the conference working, I'm teaching and he's running around taking pictures of everybody. So it's been great. Yeah. So it's been fun. So he takes the pictures and sometimes they go on the blog, sometimes they actually go on the publications.
You know, that's fantastic that he works with you. And I think I've seen some of his work over at the Guild as postcards, as greeting cards.
Right.
Talk about
That's
that.
because I weave so little. Well, I weave maybe not so little, but I weave. It's what I weave is so time consuming, and I need it for my blogs or my publications for the Handweavers Guild. Also, I have a bookstore. I publish books for my teaching. What happens is that I really don't have time to weave a series of pieces that will be appropriate for selling. Even though I'm part of a co-op, the Chimneyville Weavers as a co-op, somebody came up with the idea and they said, well, why don't you make those pieces into postcards? Terry takes those great pictures. And so that's what we did. So he takes the pieces that photographs the best. You know, sometimes, the best piece may not necessarily photograph the best. And sometimes the photograph is actually nicer than the piece. Not quite, but we know what I'm saying. So it gets, so we do that, we print them and they sell, I think, my sister points out that people don't write anymore, they don't write cards anymore, but they sell. I've sold a few and that's okay.
They do sell them. My circle of friends, we are all writing now. We're writing handwritten letters. I think I got from 5 different people this past week alone.
Well, good. I think that's important. I like to write thank you notes to my friends. So yeah.
Yes, and I'm part of a pen pal group with a church in Maryland. So people are sending out postcards and things. So I think a question that people may have about that, those postcards, I hope people will take the chance to go over there and look at them. They're such quality. We really get to see the intimacy of your work by looking at the postcards. He's the photographer, and I guess I would imagine he has a great camera, but then how does that translate into the printing on the postcards? How did you find a printer or a company to do that for you?
Oh, we do it all in here. So Terry's also techie, and actually he keeps up with the website. He researched what kind of printer we would need to print quality. And so, for example, we print monographs. So this is a monograph, and I teach classes. And so this will be everything in here he is taking pictures of, and it gets printed here. He binds them. He has a little binding machine. He binds them. He's I kid and tell him that he's my manager. He's my business manager. And really all I do is weave and he takes care of the rest. So I have a store, Marcy Bookstore online. And it's not like the best-selling, books. Obviously, there aren't that many weavers, and there's a limited number of people interested in the various topics. But whenever I also have ebooks. Some people like printed, some people like ebooks, and so I get an email that says what they want, and if they want a printed book, we send them a printed book. Some people do say that, because it's in the computers don't necessarily talk to each other when it comes to color, that they prefer the printed because then the color is true. I mean, he has software that allows him, just like when you take a picture with a camera, you have a white balance card. So there's way of doing color balance on your computer screen and on your printer. So it's got software and hardware that will do that. So the books come out pretty well. So yes, and so the printer does it all. We looked into having a printer print them for us, but it's not cost effective because they want to print 100 copies. Well, then I wouldn't even have any place to store them. Plus the fact, at the end of the year, you have to pay taxes on what you don't sell. So we print them. This is my personal copy that I use when I'm teaching. But otherwise we print them as we need them so that we don't have an inventory. We don't have a place to keep the inventory. So we just print them and mail them out. And if they want an ebook, we just send the link and off they go.
Wonderful. I know people will want to know about that printer. That sounds great, but that's for another time. I want
Yes.
to ask you about your fabric preferences. What are your choices, or what do you think works the best when it
What
comes
I
to?
like the most is silk. It had, for what I do, obviously if I was making a whole lot of towels, I wouldn't be using silk. But for what I do, I would like to primarily weave scarves and shawls for a couple of reasons. One of them is that there is enough fabric that when it's photographed and is put in a magazine or a book, or exhibits. The Handweavers Guild, when they have it, that when they have their conference, there's always exhibits to submit to, and I usually submit to teach. So when I get accepted to teach, I've been accepted for the last several years, I get asked to put a piece in the convergence teachers, the instructors, leaders, I guess they call us. So the scarves and shawls are better at making a show, showing well in a piece of fabric. And the silk or even tencel, like the scarf I'm wearing right now is silk. And tencel also, which is a new fiber, but it's actually an extruded fiber. So it's made from man-made materials. I mean, from a natural material, but it's extruded. So those fibers are slinky and they make the fabric move better. I like a lot of structures that where the floats are at different angles so they reflect the light better. And the silk or the tencel are really good at reflecting that light and showcasing the colors.
I'd really like to get a good look at that scarf you're wearing.
Sure, okay, and I have a few other pieces if you'd like to see them.
Yes.
So this actually, I don't dye, but then, let's see, actually, you need better light. I don't dye anymore. I used to dye a lot more, but there is a guild member actually, Deluxe Yarns from Vicksburg, and they do a fabulous job of dyeing their yarn. So this is their yarn. It's grays and blacks, it looks like a stripe. Let's see, I think you see it better with the light. It looks like it's got stripes, but it doesn't. It's just the way that I put it on the warp when it is dyed. So it makes kind of random stripes. So they do a fabulous job of dyeing, and they, after all, spend all of their time dyeing it. So I much rather support them than try to reproduce what they're doing. So a lot of times, it's either them or other fiber artists that dye that may not necessarily weave.
That is wonderful. Such an interactive community that supports one another.
Yes, yeah. I was really glad that she submitted. We tried to convince her to submit to the Craftsmen's Guild, and she did, and she got in. I mean, her work was fabulous. So it's two women that own the business.
Okay. I remember before I retired, there was a young lady, Maria Zering, that worked at the Arts Commission. She took a class over at the Craftsmen's Guild.
Right,
And
right.
how hard is that for someone that has never weaved anything to catch on to this wonderful craft?
Well, we of course now with the pandemic, there haven't been any classes for a year. But when I teach the beginning class, and for a while I had Kathy Perito, who's also one of our guild members, as a co-instructor. But before Kathy and now Kathy has moved to the coast, so it's a little hard for her to teach classes, but or here anyway. But basically, 10-week class. People come in, I believe that if you're going to learn to weave, that you really should start from the beginning and do the whole process. People get the wrong idea. I know that in some places, people learn to weave by going places where somebody set up the loom for them. Well, that's a difference between, say, being a passenger in a car versus driving, so sure, it's weaving, but the weaving is pretty easy at that point. You have to pay attention that you don't throw in and you beat correctly and all that, but you really have the putting the warp on the loom is really the part that is the most intensive, I would say. So but that's we start. We get them started on a sash, and we get people get their warp wound, then they put it on the loom. Of course we help them, and then they start weaving. And then by the end of 10 weeks, it's very seldom that somebody doesn't finish. If they don't finish, it's because something has happened, they miss classes. And a lot of times what happens is they finish early. So then they want to weave another project, which we're most welcome to do. And so we have had these recurring students that come in. And so she was actually taking classes until the pandemic. So hopefully one day we can go back to it. It's a small space, so it makes it difficult, so and then it may not be, we had 7 or 8 people there, which makes it cost effective. Of course, the guild makes money from it, which is good. That's what we want. But with having, only 4 people, to have social distancing may not be so cost effective, but life will go back to normal. I know that in my heart that one day things will be back. And I taught a class actually for the guild online, so on Zoom. And so we did Twills and the Twill class started at the craft center, then there was a shutdown, so we picked it up on Zoom. And then I taught another class for the guild last year for Lacey Weaves. So that was on Zoom as well. So
yeah, Maria did a really great job. I thought it was fantastic, and it didn't look like a beginner's product.
Yeah, she was very careful. Yeah, so that's what's really nice. Some people really, they like everything else, some people have the knack for it. Not to say that people can't learn it, and I think the trick is liking it. I remember this lady coming in after the first class, and she said, I'm sorry, but I can't take this class. I don't like what I'm doing. I said, well, I understand it's not for everybody, so, but one of the things that we have to be careful when we demonstrate is that people don't get the idea that weaving is just throwing the shuttle. I remember teaching a beginning class where these 2 ladies signed up, and they showed up and they were all ready to go. And they said, okay, so what yarns do we use to weave? I said, well, we're gonna, sit down and we're gonna pick the yarns that you need for the warping first. And we match them with the weft, and we'll go through all of that. And they looked at me and they said, warp? We have to warp? I said, well, yeah. There's an old joke in weaving that says you have to be warped to weave. I said, yes, you have to be warped to weave. She said, yeah, but the ladies that were doing it that Saturday, they were just throwing the shuttle. I said, yes, well, they already done that part. It would take too long to do it at the craft center. So they were not too happy, but they did it. They didn't come back, but they didn't make their sash. So yeah, we have people to understand that it is a complete process, but some people just love it. And it's very meditative. When you sit there, you really do go, the proverbial going with the flow. You throw the shuttle and be throw, beat, throw. And so it's very methodical. And
You can work
yeah,
and work out your problems and pray and all of those kinds of things.
that's right. That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah, I want to talk about, you talk about yourself as a writer, but I would submit to you that you're a technical writer. Uh, and I think that comes from that scientific background you have, because you have to write not just straightforward writing, but the details on the terminology and things that you're using, and you have to have an understanding of the level for which you're writing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that one of the big differences to me is that a lot of people are now weaving on smaller, simpler looms. And they make beautiful cloths. You know, I'm not, certainly I'm not criticizing them, but I think that doing it's basically like your needle weaving over under, you know, or your pothole weaving, you know, of our youth. We all did that. I have a godchild that I taught her to do that. All of that means that they know the over under. They may be good with colors, they may be careful with the craftsmanship, but they really don't have an understanding of what makes weaving, which is all the different structures and the fact that the colors interact differently in weaving than they do, say, in painting. Or even in quilting. You know, in quilting you have areas. So quilting is similar to, say, tapestry, where when you weave a tapestry, you weave areas. And so there's a certain color interaction, just like there is a color interaction with quilting, where you have, you know, pieces. But when you're actually intersecting warp and weft in different ways, it's a different kind of color interaction. I mean, it's not either better or worse, but it's just different. And so I think that if you don't have a good feeling or a good understanding of what the structures are doing, you really don't get a good feeling for the technical aspects of weaving. Weaving with the different structures, a lot of math. It really does. And I know there's been people that haven't liked it because they say, oh, I can't deal with the math. The flip side of that, though, is that I remember taking a tapestry class from a fabulous tapestry weaver in Seattle. And when she explained the way that you weave a curve, you know, it was this beautiful explanation. At the end of it, I said, Peggy, this is the best explanation of differential calculus I've ever heard. It comes from an artist rather than from a mathematician. And she said, don't tell me that, I hate math. I said, you may hate math, but you really understand it, which is, you know, and you don't have, you know, you may have a feeling and a good, you know, a good facility with it without even knowing that you do. So.
So can you weave tapestries on?
I can weave, I have woven tapestries, but I haven't, it's not my preference. I really prefer fabric. In tapestry, the traditional tapestry, and there's, you know, different kinds of tapestries now, but the traditional tapestry, you have work that you don't see because it's totally covered by the weft, and it makes a very sturdy fabric, but all of the design work is done with changing the weft. So it's almost like painting or doing quilting, where you piece things together. And so the artistry is not really the weaving, the artistry is the figurative aspect of it. So I like to weave fabric. I've done it. I've taken classes in all the different kinds of weaving. And so I did find my niche. And so I guess I'm old enough that I'm happy with what I'm doing.
How long have you been a member of the Craftsmen's Guild?
Since 1981. So I'm now an original member, but because I think the guild started in 77, but I was the second, second generation. It used to, I think Dan Overly used to say that. And it was Dan Overly, I don't know if you knew him. He was the first executive director of the guild. And what happened was that I moved here from Seattle after having lived in Rochester, New York and Seattle, and they both are hotbeds of weaving. And so I came here and I was looking for a Weavers Guild and contacted the Handweavers Guild of America, because by that time I was a member. And they said, there is no guild in Weavers Guild in Mississippi that we know of that is registered here. So then I found out that there was a Craftsmen's Guild, but of course I thought, oh, professional members, it's not that guild's not for me. But I found out they had a Christmas show, so I thought, oh, that'll be terrific to go shopping. Then, so we moved here in January '80, and then I get this letter from Dan saying that he got in touch with the Handweavers Guild to form a guild, and that they were going to bring in weavers from all over the state. And he did that. We formed our guild. And then during the guild, we would have show and tell. So, and Dan also was often around. I mean, the Craftsmen's Guild was the life of Dan. Dan was a wonderful human being and just gave his all to the guild. So one day he comes to me and says, I've seen your work. I think you should submit to the Craftsmen's Guild. And I said, Dan, I'm not, I have a full-time job. There's no way I can weave and sell. He said, but the guild is more than weaving and selling. The guild is about demonstrating and preserving the crafts. And what some of the weaving that you do, nobody else in Mississippi is doing right now. So it will be important to have it, to keep it. And you can demonstrate a chimney bill. So I said, okay. Then I also knew that people submitted didn't always get in the first time. So I thought, okay, that way I can submit and then won't be mad at me because I didn't do it. So I submitted and I got in. So shortly after that, Dan approached me and said, I think you should teach weaving. I said, Dan, I never taught weaving before. He said, yes, but you weave and you teach your work, so you ought to be able to do it. I said, Dan, you had an ulterior motive for me joining the Weaver Craftsmen's Guild, didn't you? So he laughed, but that's how my teaching career started. But yeah, so it was a long time ago. It was 1980. Andy Young from Pearl River was the president when I got in, so it was and Susan Ford was actually, I think, the treasurer or secretary, she was active in the guild. So I've known these folks all this long.
Do you have any other works to show us?
Oh, yes. So I will show you some scarves and shawls.
Wonderful. We'd love to see your work.
So here are this is a series that I started because of COVID, and it goes according to the seasons. So in very early spring, when all that started, I keep the pieces rolled so that they don't get too, oops. And they're all tagged because otherwise I won't remember their names or what they're made out of, when they were made. No, sorry about that. Okay. So it was kind of a gloomy day, and can you see the color?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I guess from the top you can see better. So this is a rainbow. So it was gloomy. They just reported the biggest number of deaths in Mississippi for the COVID. And so this rainbow appears, and so the piece is called Even in the Darkness, There's a Rainbow. Then things got worse, and so in the spring, this is spring colors. Started out, let's see if I put it there. Okay, from the top you can see it. So it started out with light green. The greens change here during the spring as you start with the pollens and you get darker and darker, but then it was getting darker and darker in my mind because of all the people that were dying and all the horrible things that were going on.
Do the stitches have names? I know you talked about weaving and woof. I can't remember what you said, but do they have names when you do different types of stitches?
Oh, yes. So this one is called an unbalanced twill. If you look, the front and the back are a little bit different. This actually doesn't really have a name. I modified something so that I could get these stripes, and the back and the front are different. This one is plain weave. So this is actually was done on the rigid heddle. This one is different kinds of twills. So there's gazillion structures. In fact, I have on my website, I have something called a Pictionary, and they're downloadable PDF files. A weaver can go there and find a structure they want, and each structure has a page. And there's, I think, 82 of them currently, and as I think of them, I put more in. So here, for example, here's a page, and it's lace Bronson. So you get how you weave it. This is called a drawdown. You get a picture of the fabric. You probably can't see it very well. And then
I need you to go a little more to the center. You're over to the edge.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay. So then there is a description of the structure. And so this is the book. This is my copy, but all of this is on the web for people to download under the Pictionary. So see, this is the Pictionary. So yeah, there is gazillion of them, and some of them are real subtle and some of them are really over the top. So here is one that is Isn't that incredible? There is a lattice superimposed to a fabric. So that's called a cannelé, which is a French word.
Very nice.
And then this is pretty much my favorite kind of twill. You see how it goes in two directions. So you got this lines going this way and then the lines going that way. It reflects the light really well. So they're twills. Whenever you have floats that are staggered, they're twills.
Is that hard to do? But I guess not for you. You're a master.
Well, that's 40 shafts. So you can do them on 4, but it's much simpler. This one is called, this is also a 40 shaft. This one was in a show in the Handweavers Guild. And so you see how you have lines coming down, but you also have diagonal lines. So these are done by color. The diagonal lines are done by the structure. So that's one of the things that I like to play with.
Can you come closer so we can see the diagonal lines? Come closer.
You see it? I think you see it better. Yeah, okay, there it is. You see it? Right here. Diagonal, 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 diagonal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Incredible, actually.
The other thing I weave, though, is small samples for my teaching. Oh, actually, I'll show you a couple of things that, so this is another one where you have something superimposed. So you have these kind of almost round, between round and square, superimposed to a fabric. And then the back of that, it's a little bit different. And this one, it's almost free form. So you see how it has kind of like a waterfall. I call it onde, which means waves. And then the back is the reverse.
Oh, so many fun designs.
Yeah, I mean, those are the design, they're on 40 shafts, so the design take a long time. The other thing I weave are these small samples, which is for classes that I teach. So I'm going to be teaching a class on this technique in next year at the Convergence. Our Convergence is every other year. Last year, it was postponed. So we're going to do it again we're going to try to do it again next year. So it's just a specific technique. And so I weave them, then Terry can take photographs and I can write and describe them. So that they will have a monograph for those kind of patterns. So
Okay.
those patterns use two wefts. So when you weave them, you have to throw one weft and then the next one. And so there's a whole bunch of patterns like that. They're called compound weaves because they have at least two wefts.
Mhm. In last year, January 2020, I believe I saw you in Oxford and you were teaching a class.
Right.
And what type of class was that?
I think I was teaching about color. I taught some different things, but one of the things that was really fun is I teach about color from the point of view of the intersection, also from the point of view of the way we see. Because I know that my first learning of color was from the art background. Actually, it was the woman that was teaching tapestry who taught color, and she's a wonderful colorist. But as I'm reading the science, it turns out that the way that we see color, it's a little bit different than the way that it got translated into the art. So, for example, we call them complementary colors, and we have red and green and yellow and no, I guess it's, what is it, yellow and blue, or I forget that because I'm trying not to think about complementary colors. So in science, the scientists, the neuroscientists, neurophysiologists say that we actually see color, we only see 6 things. We do see red or green, and they're opponent. They call them opponent because the brain cannot picks them out, separately like that. Then we have yellow and blue. Some people they say blue and orange, but it's really yellow and blue. And then dark and light. And from that, our brain composes everything. And the other thing that I find fascinating about that is that we, all of the things that we know that occur in weaving are explained by the science. So it's not this big mystery. So for example, I used to read that if you put red and green together, they would gray out. Then I would read that if you put red and green together, they really vibrate. Okay, which is it? Well, it turns out it's both, and it depends. So the way that our brain sees is that we first see the outline. It's called an edge effect, and then we fill in the colors. So if we can distinguish the outline, say, I say in a tapestry, you have some red and some green, but they're 2 distinct pieces, 2 distinct areas. So the brain sees red and the brain sees green, and they can see in 2 distinct areas. They do become vibrant because the brain is going red, green, red, green, red, green, and so they vibrate. But if you have really small threads, especially from far away, the brain cannot distinguish those separate threads. And so it sees red and green all together, and it becomes grayed out. So see, there is an explanation for why that occurs. And so when people describe that and make it sound like it's a mystery, it's not. It's all, well explained. So I find that fascinating. And so I have exercises that I have people do so that they realize, what's happening. And all of a sudden, they can see for themselves that those things actually are occurring, and there is a reason why they're occurring. So I really enjoyed that kind of class.
Wonderful. Before we conclude, is there anything else you wanted to share with the listeners and the viewers?
Yes, I do hope that people realize that when they buy something that is handmade, that it's not you throw it away tomorrow, that you're buying heirlooms. I have kitchen towels that friends have woven, and while I do use them, I don't clean my floors with them. So I use them, and sometimes I use them as breadcloth. So I hope that the people will support the not just the fiber artists, but all the artists, and to remember that those are really special things, and the people that do them, it's not just a job. You know, you do it because you are investing your soul in it. And so I have a piece of your work that I really cherish, is actually there by my loom in the back. And so, you know, I think about you. And so that's what I hope, that people get to know the artist behind the work, and then they will think about that artist. I have pieces by Ann Baker. I have pieces by Susan Ford. I have pieces from a lot of the craftsmen here, and I think about them. I have some wonderful pieces from George Berry, who passed away. And George and I used to teach together. And so we used to kid that we had a date every Tuesday night, because he taught his wood carving and I taught my weaving. And so over the years, I saved my pennies, and I have some really wonderful things. But one of the things that I most cherish about George Berry is the little flowers he used to make. He also made flowers for the ladies in the weaving class. We were all women at that time. And so I have a little bouquet of those flowers that he made on my window in the kitchen. I think about George every time I see them. So,
Yes.
so I hope that people realize that it's just not another job. It's not what you buy at Walmart. There's nothing wrong with what you buy at Walmart if your towel is going to be cleaning the floor. But if you want something special, the Craftsmen's Guild gift shop and gallery is where to go.
Mighty fine, mighty fine. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, what is your preference for them to do that?
Okay, actually here, if I can I share the screen?
Okay, let me see if I can set.
I have my website there, and
I think you can share it now.
okay, I will try. Yep, there it is. Okay, so there's my website. So it's marcypetrini.com. And here somewhere is, yeah, here, you can email me at marcypetrini@gmail.com. And here's some of the shawls and scarves we talked about. There's a gallery. Terry's still building on that one. He had an old one, but so is redoing it. Here's the Pictionary that I mentioned. Here's my blogs, and then there's some other instructional things there. But here's my email, and people are welcome to go and look at the website. And those are the classes I'm going to be teaching at Convergence for the Handweavers Guild of America in 2022, God willing.
Okay, and what is that email address? Because it's pretty small.
Oh, okay. It's just my name, Marcy Petrini, all one word, at gmail.com.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
This has been very enlightening. I've learned so much about weaving. I love seeing your studio, and I could talk to you all day, but
well, we all have to stop sometime. Good things have to come to an end. Yeah. So I hope that when the pandemic is under control, that you come and visit my studio. You're most welcome. It'll be great fun. You can see your piece.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marcy Petrini.
Well, thank you. I really enjoyed it.
And thank you, viewers.